USCHO.com. This is the USCHO Spotlight, a weekly podcast from U.S. College Hockey Online at USCHO.com, featuring conversations with college hockey coaches and players and journalists who cover the sport.
Welcome to USCHO Spotlight for Wednesday, February 9th, 2022. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly. This podcast episode is brought to you by DCU, Digital Federal Credit Union. What will DCU mean to you? Find out today by visiting dcu.org. Membership required. Jim, a team that is surprising a few folks in Hockey Eastland is Merrimack.
And joining us now on USCHO Spotlight, the head coach of Merrimack College, that's Scott Borek. Scott, your team, you dropped one last night, but your team has been playing some really good hockey. At my count, 8-3-1 in the last 12. You've jumped up into the top half of the Hockey East standings. What's working well right now for Merrimack?
Well, we have very good leadership on our team. We have a number of juniors who came here in our first recruiting class who are still with us. They went through some really difficult times as freshmen and sophomores, and they're really kind of leading our team right now. And it's been a nice transition. Last night's loss, you mentioned, it's probably the most disappointed hockey team I've ever been around because they just expected to win. And that's a new feeling in our locker room. It's something that's happened this year. And I give our junior class and our leadership, Max Newton, a lot of credit for that. And I think that's what I feel disappointed about last night, but I'm confident moving forward because I just think we have that base in our room.
You mentioned the junior class. If my memory serves, that was one of the largest recruiting classes I've ever seen in any college hockey program 3 years ago. Obviously, you take some risk doing that, but you brought in a lot of good players who now have all developed together. How much has that development really aided what's going on in this year's team?
Yeah, I think it's the engine, really. We've had complimentary pieces join us, and by complimentary, I mean really good pieces, and Max Newton and Alex Jeffries, and who weren't in that class, and Steven Jandrick, and I could go on with some other guys. But that group of guys came in here. They believed in something. They believed something was possible. They came here with a chip in the shoulder. None of them woke up in the morning and said, "I want to go to Merrimack." Let's be honest. So getting them here and getting their attitude, if you will, here has been really positive for our program. And hopefully now there'll be other people who say they want to go to Merrimack. But I give that group of guys, that was a leap of faith by them, and we're getting rewarded for it right now.
Talk about some of your players. In goal, you have split the time between Zachary Borgiel and Hugo Olas. I want to talk about Olas first because he just seems like a goaltender where there's no room. Such a big body in net, but he moves around really well. I guess maybe when you're that size, I think he's 6'7", if I remember, you have to be pretty economical in your movement. But his whole style just looks so calming. Yeah,
he reminds me a lot of Colin Hallenbach. When we watched when he was at Lowell, you couldn't find any net on him. And I don't think Hugo's not there yet, but he's growing into that goaltender, but not growing any more physically. Hopefully, we can't afford the pads, but he's a big person. He's 6'8". He's almost 260 pounds, and he's uniquely athletic for a man that size. And he works hard at his game. His biggest thing he's had to get used to is the traffic in North America. I think when you're in Sweden, you make a save, you look up and you hand the puck to the ref. Because there's no one else around you. In Hockey East, you make a save, you're going to have to make another 2 or 3 and at least take a slash or two before the whistle's blown. So that's been an adjustment for him. One that I think in the second half he's made really, really well. Early in the season, that's what he struggled with was the traffic. But now it's happenstance to him, and it's been really good to see that development.
A couple of guys in front of him, Declan Carlisle, really solid defenseman, Liam Walsh, both of them named this week as a finalist for the Walter Brown Award. Can you talk a little bit about what you see in each of those two players?
Well, they each of them have one commonality, and that is they're excessively competitive. Declan Carlisle, everybody sees what he can't do, and I've had pro guys talking about his skating and does he do this well enough? And I put him in a race with anyone in the league, if it's for the puck, he's going to be right there. You know, I think he might win that race. He's played the offside for 3 years. Couldn't be more impressed with the way he's developed. You know, kind of his skating. He's very quick, even if he's a little bit ugly. He's got really good edges, and he can get up in the play offensively. His instincts are very good as well. So he's made a major impact on both ends of the rink for us. He's also someone who loves to eat pucks, and that's someone who's excessively competitive. And so he's been a good player for us for 2 years. He's been a great player for us this year. And Liam Walsh is an interesting story. I think Liam was the very first recruit we had in that class. He was, you know, at Cedar Rapids, had been there for 4 years. We recruited as much for the C on his sweater as for his game. And then, you know, when he got here, his game, he had a good freshman year, but he got dinged up a lot, wasn't able to kind of have the year that I think he could have had. And then last year, about middle of the season, he was playing fourth line. He wasn't getting a lot done offensively. I think he was trying to, you know, we moved him to center. Then, you know, he had a chance to play. Someone got hurt and went down, so we had to move him up. First game on the power play, he scores. He never has been off it since. And he hasn't been out of our top six since then. And he's a guy who came to work every single day and never looked outside himself for answers. He always looked in the mirror. And, you know, I couldn't have more respect for a young man than I have for that young guy.
Scott, let's talk a little bit more about recruiting. You mentioned the work to get kids to come and to buy in. And a lot of teams seem to specialize in different areas where they want to recruit geographically. But you've got players from Europe and the USHL and other U.S. junior leagues, Western Canada, Eastern Canada, a couple of prep kids. How do you go about the approach of casting such a wide net, I guess, for lack of a better term?
Well, you know, I think it has helped that I spent a fair amount of time in the Ivies recruiting, and that's really how you have to recruit in the Ivies. You know, you have so many restrictions that other teams don't have that you can't just stop in one league, two leagues, three leagues. You have to go all across the world to find your players. And I think that's been helpful for us here at Merrimack because we've kind of gone about it the same way. And you have to find the guy who wants to go to a small school, you know, find a guy, you know, who wants to be near Boston, but not in Boston. Find a guy who can develop in the crest that's on the front of the sweater. And I think we've had to go that far to do that. Now, the good news is that certainly the players we have here from Europe have been very successful. That's made it easier to get other players from Europe. We've also, in the Western Canadians we have here, been very successful. So we have a bit of a little mojo, if you will, in the Western Canadian leagues. In the USHL, everyone, if you're going to recruit and be good, you have to recruit USHL. So, you know, I think we've been able to do a lot of that. The thing that I want to say as well that we've also spent a lot of time on is I think the Eastern League, the NCDC, and the EHL, those are good hockey leagues. And we try to make sure we're identifying those players as well. That's why we have some prep players, because we were watching them on their way to those leagues. And then two of them, Alex Jeffries and Matty Capone, we just asked just to come right in. But we also recruit the Eastern Leagues just as heavily. We don't have as many players on our roster right now because, frankly, the kids who were close to Merrimack haven't always wanted to come to Merrimack. So I'm hoping that Matty Capone and Alex Jeffries turn that a little bit, because I think Merrimack is, you know, I don't know if you have kids, but the little engine that could, you know, and I just don't think it's appreciated enough for the great community and school that it is. And once we get there, then we'll be able to recruit more locally as well. But we're working our way there as a school and also as a program.
You also have about a handful of transfers that have been part of the program this year. How did you approach that when the portal opened up this past year?
A lot of fear, a lot of trepidation. But, you know, we were very fortunate with Max Newton because Max had a situation where, ironically, we had a player that wasn't going to make our team after his junior year and transferred out to Alaska and was a teammate of Max's. So when they shut down last year, Josh and Dan, the two assistant coaches, knew him and were aware of him and started talking to him. But Logan Coombs was actually the guy who, you know, talked him into I think coming here because he had other options as well. Logan just told me he thought it'd fit right in with our school and with our program. And obviously he has. So, you know, I guess you have to give great kudos to Coombsy because, you know, he wasn't going to make our team and chose another option, yet still loved the school enough to recruit for us. Jandrick and Derflinger, we had relationships with. We had recruited Steven Jandrick the first time around, so we had a relationship with him. And Jake Derflinger played in USHL for Dan Jewell. So we knew the three players because of relationships, and they all bring something different to us. And Jake Derflinger is not someone that gets on the score sheet all the time, sometimes on the penalty sheets, but not on the score sheet all the time. But you can't measure how he contributes to our team, Monday through Thursday, and then also Friday and Saturday. So we've been really lucky with our transfers. The last transfer I would neglect to mention, because he's not a graduate transfer, is Christian Felton. Christian is someone who I liked when he was at Kimball Union. Our staff liked him in Vernon. I don't know what happened with him at Bentley, but he's playing great hockey for us right now. His uncle is Timmy Whitehead and at KUA and former Maine coach. And I trust Timmy, and Timmy had coached him. And, Timmy thought we were getting a good player there, and he's 100% correct.
More with Scott Borek in a moment. This podcast is brought to you by DCU Digital Federal Credit Union. Visit dcu.org.
This is the USCHO Spotlight, a weekly podcast from U.S. College Hockey Online.
Know how people say life happens? Well, for me, life was happening, and I needed a new truck. I didn't have time to shop around for a good loan, so I got one from the dealer, higher interest and all. Month after month, those payments were squeezing me. So I went to DCU. They refinanced my loan and helped lower my rate, which lowered my payments. These days, I have more money in my pocket for whatever life throws at me. What will DCU mean to you? Insured by NCUA. Membership required. Visit dcu.org.
Back with USCHO Spotlight and our guest, Scott Borek. I'd like to touch on a couple of things that are more about the broader landscape, and that comes into 3-on-3 overtime and shootouts. This is really the first real season, kind of right off last year as being an oddity, the first real season with that. How do you think that's working so far?
Terrible for Merrimack College, but I understand the push to it, and I am one of those people who doesn't understand why we have different rules in the NHL. But this is different. In the NHL, there's 82 games, and everything kind of balances itself out. I think in college hockey, playing 3-on-3, I don't really like it. I'm not a fan of it. It's not the same game. It can get very boring because teams just are starting to defend the whole time. And you get players on your bench who don't get to be part of overtime, who have been part of the whole game to that point. So I don't like 3-on-3. I think I'd rather have it a tie game. Like, I don't know what's wrong with two teams battling for 65 minutes and both teams coming out with a point. And I understand why we want to have winners and losers, but that's a new thing, right? I don't think that's as critical as it's being made out to be. And I don't think the fans do either. That's my opinion, but I know that's not shared by everybody. So I really don't like it. And I think it's put us in a tough spot a couple of times. It's made me put guys on the bench who have already played a lot of hockey because they really helped us 5-on-5. And I don't like that feeling at all. So, in fact, I think we've lost a couple of times because I've tried to use more guys than I should have. But at the end of the day, it's the way we're playing it right now. But I think it's not great for college hockey.
Well, that kind of leads into the next question. You've got D1 head coaching experience going back more than 25 years. Over that time, if you compare what you do on a normal daily basis as head coach at Merrimack and go back to Lake Superior State in the late 90s, how has the job changed? What things have changed about it?
Hopefully I'm more successful. That's one thing. But the job itself is changed so much because the kids have changed so much. And when I was at Lake Superior, you would not, team meetings were common. Group meetings were common. Individual meetings were not so much. The players didn't really need it. They didn't even want it to some extent. Now you're involved much more in each player's lives. I enjoy that change. It's certainly a time-consuming change. But if you're comfortable with being direct and being honest, I find this generation of players can take it. And they actually don't know, can they take it? They want it. So I enjoy the way the game is, where the college coaching has kind of morphed into this more personalized approach. And I hope that it's something that our team can continue to grow from. But our particular team this year and the teams we've had since I've been here, I think are closer than any teams I had at Lake Superior because of that. I feel much more in tune with their lives and what they're going through academically and away from the rink. And I've really enjoyed that. And I think I coached at NESCAC as well at Colby before. And I loved that level because I was in all those situations I just mentioned. Whereas at Lake Superior, it was a business, and that's why you get fired. And now at Merrimack, and now in just at this era, I think you have to be more involved in those other areas. And I'm really enjoying that part of it.
Scott, we've kind of highlighted the fact that you're having a great season. For these players, that's new, as you mentioned right off the start. This is the best season that Merrimack has had in a while. You're right there in the middle of the pairwise mix, 17 right now, just below the pairwise bubble. Is that even something you talk about with the players, or do you just kind of have to keep that in your head and worry more about tomorrow than you do about what could be a great moment for the program if you were to make an NCAA tournament?
I've been very transparent about that with the players. That's our goal. And there have been times this year that I think that we've been surprised to be in these, dog fights and games. And after periods, a 2-2 game, you're playing whoever. And this is what we expected. We expected to be in these games. That's why I'm coaching. That's why you guys play. Don't be surprised by it. I honestly felt like last night was the first time that the moment might have got the best of us a little bit. We might have been over the top going into the game, which drained us pretty quickly when the game got really hard. But we'll get better because of that. Because now, that's the first time I think we've been in a building on a campus and in our community that's really talking about the men's ice hockey team. That's really excited about it. That's pushing for it. That's showing up on a Tuesday night. And I think our players may have been overexcited last night. And we need to get, I need to get back into them that this is where we expected to be, fellas. Like, none of us came here to be the doormat of Hockey East. That's someone else's job. It's not Merrimack's job. This is and I know I'm sounding like I'm recruiting you guys right now, but this is a great community and it deserves to have a good competitive hockey program. And we're going to do everything we can to do that. And if you came here not expecting to win, then you came to the wrong place. And so we'll talk about getting to the national tournament. We're going to talk about winning the league. We're going to talk about the playoffs. We're going to talk about what we need to do to be the best team in the league. And then we'll do that, and hopefully we'll achieve that.
Coming up, you have a kind of a strange situation here where your next 3 games are against the same opponent. You'll start this Sunday on the road against Vermont up in Burlington, and then 2 games next weekend against the Catamounts as well. I assume as a coach, maybe that's not the worst thing because you don't have to over prep for multiple opponents, but you by the time this next weekend is over, you will know Vermont hockey pretty well.
Yeah, hopefully I know by the time today's over, but. It's a quirk in the schedule that be lying to you if I said I was happy with it, because I just think it's avoidable. And playing any team 3 times, I don't care who you're playing, is not a good schedule for you. You could be the favorite team for all 3 or the underdog for all 3. I just don't think it's a favorable schedule for anyone. I think it should have been avoided. We didn't create it, but it is what it is. So, we'll go into it and we'll compete our tails off. And I know Vermont's going to do the same thing. And, I'm well aware what they, when Vermont sees Merrimack coming in, what their mental mindset is of the players. We're a team that they think they can have success against. That's just who we are. And we're going to have to work that much harder to be successful against them.
Well, Merrimack College, you are having a heck of a year, Scott Borek, 14-12-1 overall, right there in the Hockey East mix, sitting tied for 5th, but just a game out of 2nd place. Congratulations thus far on a great year. Keep it up the rest of the way, and we'll hopefully come playoff time, we'll get to catch up with you again. Well,
I appreciate you guys reaching out to us. It's great to catch up. Love the job you do for college hockey, so thank you guys.
That's Merrimack's Scott Borek. Jim, it's interesting to talk about recruiting with Scott because Merrimack is in the shadow of those 4 teams that are in the Beanpot and really not all that far away from places like New Hampshire. And so they have to cast a wider net, as we described it in the interview, to find players. And it seems like he's done a pretty good job of assembling a team this year.
Really good job. And, it does go back to really 3 years ago when he brought in, I want to say that junior class might have had 24 players at the time when they were freshmen. It was a ridiculous number of players in one class. And listen, a couple of years from now, he's going to be in that. Him and his staff will be in that situation again, where you're recruiting a large class. But they do seem to pull some real diamonds in the rough, and I think for Merrimack, and we're starting to see it now, you have to, as a player coming in, have a little bit of a different mentality. You're probably not the blue chip that has, been the most successful player in every league and every, season of your life. You're more of a hardworking, grinding player. But I watched this team on the ice, and they play with that personality, that characteristic, where they work really hard. They fight to get to pucks. They are one of the toughest teams I have seen this year in 50-50 puck battles along the wall. And that's what's making them successful. But you're right. You're not just walking up to the U.S. national team development program and, picking out 6 names on a list and saying, hey, you're coming to Merrimack. It's a lot different recruiting process, but one that it does seem that Scott and his staff are doing quite well with.
The other thing I was fascinated to hear about is the change in coaching. Now, you mentioned Colby College, where he was before Lake Superior back in the early 90s. In fact, he was D1 or a D3 rather, coach of the year back in 1994. But the difference in treating things like a business and having team meetings to today, where you're more involved one-on-one, that's very interesting to hear about. And not every coach has been able to make that transition as easily as it sounds like Scott Borek has.
You know what? I think a large part of his success in that is probably the work he's done as an assistant coach. At Providence, New Hampshire, had some real success there. And you think about, it's usually the assistant coach that is that, kind of that mentor that will have those sit downs. The head coaches, you don't always see them be the touchy-feely one-on-one type of coaches that want to get the interpersonal relationships. But as he mentioned, if you have kids who are coachable, it certainly is a tool that can help you be more successful, because you don't have to call anybody out in front of an entire club. You can just sit in a one-on-one meeting with a player. And, as he said, if you have players who want to take that type of instruction and who respond well to it, it really is a good development tool. I think you've seen that at Merrimack. And I think, I'd be interested to hear how many head coaches across college hockey right now sit down one-on-one with players. I would think it's probably more than I would have really, processed in my own mind 5 years ago. But I don't know that, as you said, I'm not sure that every coach adopts to that.
I think the thing I hear from coaches is this generation of players wants to know not just what they're doing, but why they're doing it. And when they understand why, you get a much better buy-in, and the players get behind it. And Scott mentioned something in that direction.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's the need for feedback. Listen, almost everything we do in life has some sort of feedback to it, especially in this generation. It's instant. Usually you're getting some sort of response to whatever it is, whether it's posting on TikTok or Twitter or some social media platform, or even you taking exams, in a school setting. Oftentimes you're taking them on a computer, and as soon as you finish the exam, you can get a score within about 2 minutes. Instant feedback is something I think that today's generation of players really likes. And I think so if you as a coach can provide that, and you hear coaches talk about how you never saw this one 30 years ago when I started in this game, where you would have an individualized reel of clips for a player to watch at the end of a game. Now you do. And the technology out there makes it a lot easier. I can't even imagine, a coach back in 1992 sitting there with, 27 VHS tapes and editing them together so that you could give every player their own clips. But it's that feedback, that instant feedback, that I think is very effective. It makes these players a little bit more teachable.
Well, that'll do it for this episode of USCHO Spotlight. We've been sponsored by DCU Digital Federal Credit Union. What will DCU mean to you? Find out today by visiting dcu.org. Membership required. For Jim Connelly, I'm Ed Trefzger, and we'll catch you next time.
This has been the USCHO Spotlight, a production of U.S. College Hockey Online. Visit uscho.com/podcasts to listen or subscribe.